Almost there. Chapter 19. Facilier. "Good evening, sir." Facilier smiled at the well-dressed gentleman approaching his table in Jackson Square. "Can I interest you in a game of cards?" "Out of my way," the man said, swatting at him with the folded newspaper he carried. Facilier glowered at the man's back as he continued down the sidewalk. If only he hadn't been in so much debt to his friends on the other side, Facilier would have had them burn the man to a crisp, right on the spot. Alas, he owed too much already, and he was incapable of producing a fire by sheer will alone. He had to rely on more conventional methods, like the kerosene he'd poured over Rudy Davis and the All-Stars instruments. He chuckled at the havoc he'd caused with that stroke of genius, or should he say the havoc Tiana had caused, because that was what he planned to tell her. He already had her thinking she was the reason this peculiar fog had overtaken the city, but the fog didn't go far enough. It wasn't dangerous enough to those close to Tiana, but this fire? The fire was personal. He would make her believe that this was punishment from his friends on the other side, and that was only the start. The potion was still his easiest route to LaBeouf, to making sure that all of this hadn't been for nothing. So Facilier wouldn't count solely on the mysterious fog and the fire to make Tiana fall in line. She was too smart for him to take that chance. This fog would disappear as quickly as it had shown up, and she would write the fire off as some sort of fluke. No, he had another ace in his pocket. Actually, his aces were tied up in a room back at his emporium. He'd ambushed the pasta maker on his way to Tiana's restaurant that morning. Not only did she rely on the old man Slavaggio for his wares, but Facilier had witnessed their new friendship. She was chummy with just about every person who set foot in that restaurant, and he was going to remove each and every one of them until he convinced her that his friends on the other side were behind the disappearances. He already had a nice collection going. If he could make her see that her stubborn resistance to using his special new potion was causing others to suffer, she would come to heel. Well, she had better come to heel. He had less than a week to trick her into feeding LaBeouf that concoction before his friends on the other side came calling. Realizing he needed to check in on his captives, Facilier started packing up his cards and table. He might be a bit deceitful, but he wasn't a complete monster. Besides, they could possibly prove useful in other ways. He navigated through the green fog toward his home in Pirates Alley. When he entered, a blast of cold air hit him. Facilier shut his eyes for a brief moment. It was as if he had summoned them with his thoughts. The shadows. The low moans and groans emerged from somewhere deep within the walls of the drafty space, the air becoming colder as their groans grew louder until both reached a crescendo when they appeared. They slithered along the walls and on the floor at its feet. "Friends, it's so nice to see you again," Facilier lied. A gust of wind billowed. Yes, I agree. The time for small talk is over." He canted his head to the side, listening to the rhythmic intonations that only those indebted to them could understand. "Yes, I know, payment is coming due." The Shadows didn't know it yet, but this would be their final collection, because this was the last deal he planned to make with them. He nodded and murmured in agreement as their lamentations continued, until they said something that made him stiffen in shock. "What was that?" Facilier asked. "Has Tiana signed the contract?" A high-pitched keening accompanied a frigid blast of cold air. The Shadows didn't like repeating themselves. But why would that matter? I made the request on her behalf and it was done," Facilier said. "It was a verbal agreement. We've done these before." Their answering chant sent a chill down Facilier's spine. That had nothing to do with the brutally cold temperature of this room. Had he heard them correctly? The exchanging of a soul required more than just a verbal agreement? No, that couldn't be right. I think you're mistaken," Facilier said. Gale force winds blasted across his face. Facilier held up his forearm to shield himself from the fierce gust. "Read the governing covenant?" He raced to the cabinet where contracts for the numerous bargains he'd made with the Shadows over the years were stored. A collection of scrolls sprang forth from the drawer. He pitched them left and right, clearing out the drawer until he reached the bottom, where the very first contract he made with them lay. He unfurled and crumpled parchment and scanned the document, his hands shaking so badly he could barely make out the words. "See, here it is," he said, once he got to the end. He held up the document so the faceless creatures could see his wobbly 10-year-old signature scrawled across the bottom. It says right here that I can make requests on behalf of others. They spoke in sighs and grunts, in juxtaposition of the soft and sharp sounds of brutal cacophony that sent Facilier's head reeling. What was that? He had missed the clause in the exchanging of souls? Fear caught in his throat as his eyes continued down the document. The verbiage on the exchange of souls was at the very end in print that was tiny and faded. He squinted at the minuscule words, but there they were, right there, in black and white. The soul of the one who requested the deed shall vacate the body 1 year from the signing of an agreement in exchange for the soul of another being returned to the earth. All knowledge of the returned soul's previous death shall be wiped clean from the consciousness of those who knew him, with the exception of those who are party to the agreement. Payment shall be rendered by signatures of the agreement. Tiana wasn't a signatory. What does this mean? Facilier said. More groans, more deep, intense, ghastly moans. This final warning from the shadows was the most terrifying thing Facilier had ever heard. If Tiana didn't physically sign over her soul, he, as the lone signatory, must forfeit his own.